They never gave him a diploma. They never gave him a classroom. They never gave him permission. And yet, he changed the entire world while you were sitting in a system designed to make you obedient. Someone somewhere with nothing but hunger and time was quietly becoming dangerous. I'm going to show you something in this video that most people will never understand. Not because it's complicated, but because they were never supposed to know it. Stay with me, because by the time this is over, you will never look at learning the same way again. Part 1. Let me tell you what you were actually taught, not in the curriculum, not in the textbooks they handed you, but in the invisible curriculum, the one no teacher ever spoke out loud. You were taught that knowledge belongs to institutions, that wisdom lives inside walls, that power comes after permission. You were taught to sit down, to raise your hand, to wait your turn, to memorize what someone else decided was important, and then to perform, to be graded, to be evaluated, to be approved, and they called this education. But here's what they never told you. That system was never designed to produce powerful men. It was designed to produce predictable ones. Think about that. Every school, every classroom, every standardized test built not to ignite your mind, but to standardize it, to make you easier to manage, easier to employ, easier to replace, because a man who thinks for himself is dangerous. A man who teaches himself is uncontrollable, and the system has no use for the uncontrollable. So it trains you to distrust your own curiosity. It grades you based on its questions, not yours. It rewards you for remembering, not for discovering. It praises you for following, not for leading. And slowly, without you realizing it, you learn to need approval before you act. You learn to wait for someone to validate your intelligence. You learn to believe that if no one gave you a certificate, you weren't qualified. That is not education. That is conditioning. Now, open your eyes and look at the men who actually changed the world. Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, denied the right to read, told that learning would destroy him, and yet he stole moments of literacy. He memorized letters from scraps. He learned not because a school opened its doors, but because he refused to remain in the dark. He didn't learn just in case it would be useful someday. He learned because his survival depended on it. He learned because freedom was on the other side of knowledge. That is the difference, right there. The institutional learner memorizes information, just in case it appears on the exam, just in case someone asks about it someday, just in case it becomes relevant. But the self-taught man learns with urgency. He learns because a problem is in front of him right now. He learns because failure is not theoretical. It is real and immediate and costly. This is what academics call the difference between just-in-case learning and just-in-time learning. But what they don't tell you is this. Just-in-time learning doesn't just make you faster, it makes you deeper. Because when you learn to solve a real problem, the knowledge fuses into you. It doesn't disappear after the exam. It becomes part of how you think. Douglass didn't study linguistics. He didn't receive a degree in rhetoric. But when he stood before a crowd and spoke, senators went silent, crowds wept, presidents listened, because mastery earned through necessity carries a weight that certificates never will. And you know this. Somewhere deep inside you, you have always felt it, that the smartest person in the room isn't always the most educated, that the most capable person in the company isn't always the most credentialed, that the man who builds something real often looks nothing like what the system said success was supposed to look like. You felt that gap, that confusion, that quiet anger when a man with less paperwork than you moves faster, earns more, leads louder. That man didn't find a better school. He didn't find a better teacher. He found something more powerful than both. He found himself. And that is what this entire video is about. Not about rejecting learning, about reclaiming it, about understanding that the most dangerous, the most powerful, the most sovereign version of you cannot be built inside someone else's curriculum. It can only be built by you, for you, through the hunger that lives inside you right now. This is not a motivational speech. This is a map. And by the time we are done, you will know exactly how the self-taught man thinks, how he learns, how he builds, and why no institution on earth can ever catch him. Part 2, the myth of being well-rounded plus rejecting authority plus the outsider advantage. Now let's destroy another lie, one they've been feeding you since you were a child, the lie of being well-rounded. You were told to study everything, math, history, literature, science, art, a little of everything, enough to pass. enough to demonstrate balance. Because in the eyes of the institution, balance is safe, balance is manageable, balance is unthreatening. But let me ask you something. When you look at the men who dominated their industries, who built empires from nothing, who became legends in their fields, were they balanced? No, they were obsessed, they were singular, they were dangerous in one direction. Michael Faraday, a bookbinder's apprentice, no university degree, no academic credentials, no formal training in physics or chemistry, and yet he discovered electromagnetic induction. He laid the foundation for the electric motor. He made possible the modern world you are living in right now. How? Not because he knew a little about everything, because he went deeper than anyone else into the one thing that obsessed him: electricity, magnetism, the invisible forces that the academic world of his time barely understood. And because he was an outsider, he asked questions the insiders had stopped asking. He challenged assumptions the credentialed experts had forgotten to question. He saw what trained eyes had been conditioned to overlook. This is the paradox of expertise. The longer you stay inside a system, the more you inherit its blind spots. Every field has unspoken rules. Every industry has invisible ceilings. Every institution has beliefs so deep they are no longer examined. They are simply obeyed. The insider cannot see these chains because they have been wearing them so long, they forgot they are chains. But the self-taught man walks in without chains. He doesn't know what's not supposed to work. He doesn't know what questions are too obvious to ask. He doesn't know which experiments are beneath serious scholars. And so, he tries everything. He questions everything. He discovers things the credentialed men walked past every single day. This is your advantage. If you have ever felt like an outsider, if you have ever felt like the system wasn't made for you, if you have ever felt like you were learning things on your own because no one else would teach you, that is not a weakness. That is a weapon. Now let's talk about the most dangerous thing the education system does. Not the bad teachers, not the outdated curriculum, not the student debt. The most dangerous thing it does is teach you to trust authority over reality. Think about what that means. When you were in school, if your experiment contradicted the textbook, the experiment was wrong. If your answer differed from the teacher's, your answer was wrong. If your logic led you somewhere the curriculum didn't sanction, your logic was wrong. Reality was irrelevant. Authority was everything. And this is how they built an entire generation of men who, before doing anything, look for permission. Before building anything, ask if it's been approved. Before believing anything, wait for an expert to confirm it. Elon Musk did not ask for permission to build rockets. He read textbooks. He called aerospace engineers. He taught himself orbital mechanics. He failed explosively, multiple times, publicly, expensively. And then, while the credentialed experts at NASA were managing bureaucracy, he landed a rocket, vertically, back on the launch pad, something the entire space industry said was impractical. He didn't succeed despite being self-taught. He succeeded because of it, because he had no institution telling him what was impossible. He only had reality. And reality, unlike authority, can be negotiated with. Let me give you another dimension of this. The self-taught man doesn't just escape the limitations of one field. He escapes the mental walls between fields. The institutional learner is a specialist by design, educated in a silo, trained to think within boundaries. But the autodidact, the self-directed learner, moves between worlds. He reads history one week, psychology the next, engineering the week after. And then something happens, something that no curriculum can manufacture. He starts connecting things that were never supposed to be connected. Steve Jobs, he dropped out of Reed College, but he kept attending one class, a calligraphy class, not because it was practical, not because it would help him build computers, but because it fascinated him. 10 years later, the Macintosh became the first computer in history with beautiful typography, multiple typefaces, proportional spacing, design that felt human. A connection no engineer would have made, because engineers weren't in the calligraphy class. Jobs said it himself. If he had never dropped in on that single course, the Mac would have had no beautiful typography. And since Windows copied the Mac, no personal computer would have had it. One self-taught curiosity. change the visual language of the entire digital world. This is the creative advantage of the autodidact. He doesn't just learn more, he learns differently. He combines what others keep separate. He synthesizes what institutions compartmentalize. And in that synthesis, he creates things the world has never seen. Part 3. Section: Learning Through Failure plus Collapse of Gatekeepers plus the Lincoln Principle. Now I need to talk to you about something uncomfortable, something the school system spent 12 years training you to fear: failure. In every classroom you sat in, failure was punishment, a red mark on your paper, a bad grade on your transcript, a signal to the world that you were behind, that you were insufficient, that you were less. And so, you learned something far more dangerous than any subject. You learned to avoid failure. You learned to attempt only what you were already confident about, to stay in the safe lanes, to never risk the red mark, and you carried that conditioning out of school and into your life, into your business decisions, into your relationships, into your daily choices. You stopped experimenting because experiments can fail. You stopped trying new approaches because new approaches can be wrong. You stopped pushing past your current knowledge because beyond your knowledge, there is the possibility of looking stupid. And so you stayed small, not because you lacked intelligence, but because the system had successfully installed a fear response into the exact moment you needed to be brave. Now look at the self-taught man. He has no grade to protect, no transcript to defend, no professor watching his performance. He only has a problem and the urgent need to solve it. So he experiments, he fails, he analyzes the failure, he adjusts, he experiments again. Each failure is not punishment. Each failure is data, precise, unfiltered, real-world data that no textbook could have given him. This is the feedback loop that builds genuine mastery, not theory confirmed by a grade, but reality tested by consequence. Thomas Edison. Over 1,000 failed experiments before the light bulb. When a reporter asked him how it felt to fail 1,000 times, he corrected the question. He said, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." That is not a motivational quote. That is a fundamentally different relationship with failure. Edison did not inherit that relationship from a classroom. He built it through years of self-directed experimentation, through the habit of treating reality as a teacher, and every failed attempt as a lesson with a tuition fee already paid. You are sitting on that same ability right now. Every domain you are afraid to enter, every skill you believe you're not qualified for, every industry you think requires permission before you can participate is just a series of experiments waiting to be run. Now, let's talk about the moment we are living in, because this moment is unprecedented. For most of human history, knowledge was controlled, libraries were locked, books were expensive, universities were gatekeepers. If you wanted to learn something, you needed access, and access was rationed. The church controlled theology, the guilds controlled trade secrets, the universities controlled science, the governments controlled information. If you were born outside the gate, you stayed outside the gate. But something happened in the last 30 years, something that no institution saw coming, something that no gatekeeper could stop. The internet. Right now, sitting in whatever room you are in, you have access to every scientific paper published in the last century, every business strategy that built every Fortune 500 company, every philosophical text from every civilization in recorded history, every programming language, investment framework, negotiation tactic, psychological principle, available, free, immediately. The gatekeepers are gone, the walls are down, the libraries are open. And what did most people do with this? They used it to watch content they will forget by morning. They used it to seek approval from strangers. They used it to entertain themselves into passivity, the most powerful information tool in human history, and the majority use it to distract themselves from the very growth it makes possible. This is the gap. This is the opening. This is where the self-taught man becomes something separate from the crowd. Not because he has better access than others, everyone has the same access, but because he is the rare one who treats that access as sacred, who wakes up with a question instead of a notification, who spends an hour building understanding instead of consuming distraction, who chooses difficult, useful knowledge over easy, forgettable entertainment. Now I want to tell you about a man who had no access, no internet, no library of significance, no formal schooling beyond a single year: Abraham Lincoln. He grew up in poverty so complete that books were treasures he had to borrow and return. He walked miles to retrieve a single volume. He read by firelight because candles were a luxury. He had almost no formal education, and yet He became one of the most articulate, philosophically sophisticated leaders in American history. He argued landmark legal cases. He wrote speeches that are still studied by rhetoricians today. He navigated the most destructive war in his nation's history through a combination of strategic intelligence, emotional depth, and moral clarity that his credentialed opponents lacked entirely. How? He read obsessively. He analyzed everything. He practiced constantly. He questioned relentlessly. And he never, not once, waited for someone to give him permission to become extraordinary. Lincoln is not an inspiration. Lincoln is a mirror. He is showing you what is possible when a man refuses to accept that his circumstances determine his ceiling. You have more resources than Lincoln ever had, more access, more time, more tools. The only question is whether you will use them, like the passive majority, or like him. Part 4. Section Identity Transformation. I want you to stop for a moment and feel what has been building inside you, because I didn't bring you through all of this to give you information. I brought you through it to show you something about yourself. You already knew the system was broken. You already sensed that credentials were not the same as capability. You already felt, deep in a place you rarely speak from, that you were capable of more than what any institution had measured in you. That feeling wasn't arrogance. It wasn't delusion. It was signal. The part of you that refuses to accept the ceiling. The part of you that keeps returning to ideas when no one is grading you. The part of you that gets obsessed with subjects just because they fascinate you, not because they're on a syllabus. That part of you is not an accident. That part of you is the only part of you that matters. Now, we are going to talk about the identity of the self-taught man, not the tactics, not the study techniques, not the productivity hacks, the identity, because the mistake most men make is trying to adopt self-directed learning as a strategy, as a method, as a habit to add to their routine. That is not how this works. The self-taught man doesn't just learn differently. He thinks differently. He sees himself differently. He moves through the world differently. He is not a student waiting to be taught. He is a sovereign intelligence that has claimed the right to build himself. That word, sovereign, is important. Sovereign means you answer to no authority above yourself when it comes to your own development. Not a professor, not a certification board, not a system, not a credential, not society's timeline for when you are ready. Not other people's judgments about what you should be learning, not the fear of looking unqualified, not the anxiety of doing something without formal training. Sovereign means, I decide what I need, I go get it, I test it against reality, I refine, I repeat, and I build daily, without waiting for anyone's approval. This is what separates the autodidact from the obedient student. Not intelligence, not work ethic, not even curiosity, though all of these matter. It is the refusal to outsource your own growth to someone else's system. Now let me tell you what happens to the man who fully embraces this. He becomes difficult to compete with, not because he knows more, though he often does, not because he works harder, though he often does, but because he is never finished. The institutionally educated man stops learning at graduation. He has the degree, he has the credential, he is now qualified, and so he stops. The self-taught man has no graduation, there is no ceremony, no moment when someone tells him he is complete. And because of that, he never stops. He is perpetually building, perpetually sharpening, perpetually adding dimensions that the credentialed man never knew existed. 5 years after they both enter an industry, the credentialed man is still using what school taught him. The self-taught man has rebuilt himself entirely, 3 times. This is not a small advantage. This is the kind of gap that becomes unbridgeable, and the credentialed man can feel it happening, that quiet dread when he realizes the self-taught man in the room is not behind him. He is ahead and widening the distance. Now, I want to address one more thing before we close, the imposter syndrome. That voice inside you that says, who are you to learn this? You weren't trained for this. You don't have the credentials. What if someone finds out you're figuring this out as you go? Let me tell you what that voice is. That voice is the last remnant of the conditioning, the final echo of the system inside your head, still trying to protect its authority over you. Even after you've already walked away from it, here is what you do with that voice. You don't silence it. You don't fight it. You don't wait for it to go away. You use it. Every time that voice says, you're not qualified, you hear, you're in territory that matters. Every time it says, who are you to do this? You hear, you're building something no one gave you permission to build. Every time it says, "What if you're wrong?" you hear, "You're getting real feedback from reality." The imposter syndrome is not evidence of insufficiency, it is evidence of ambition. It is the feeling that comes when you are operating beyond your previous ceiling, which is exactly where mastery is built. Lincoln felt it, Faraday felt it, Douglas felt it, Jobs felt it. Every self-taught man who ever built something worth building felt that voice and kept building anyway. You are not here by accident. You didn't find this video because you are content. You found it because something in you is hungry. Something in you already knows that the next version of yourself, the sovereign, self-directed, dangerous version, cannot be built by staying in the comfortable lane. That version of you reads when others scroll. That version of you experiments when others wait for permission. That version of you builds when others debate whether they're qualified. That version is not a fantasy. It is you, minus the conditioning, minus the approval seeking, minus the fear of the red mark. The question is not whether you are capable of becoming that man. You are. The question is whether you will make the decision today, not when the conditions are perfect, not when you feel ready, not when someone validates your direction. Today, because the world is not waiting for you to be certified. The market is not waiting for your diploma. The opportunity in front of you is not interested in your credentials. It is only interested in what you can build, what you can solve, what you are willing to learn at whatever cost to make it real. The self-taught man does not rule the world because he was lucky. He rules it because he understood one thing, earlier than everyone else, that the most powerful classroom on earth has no walls, no teacher, no curriculum, no schedule. It is the space you enter. Every time you choose to learn something difficult, not because someone told you to, but because you decided that you needed to become more. That classroom is open right now. It was open when you woke up this morning. It will be open when everyone else is asleep tonight. The only thing it has ever required is a man willing to walk through the door. Are you that man? Then prove it. Not to me, not to the world, to yourself. If this video changed something in you, if something shifted, comment the word sovereign below. Right now, that one word tells me you are no longer waiting for permission to build the version of yourself that the world is not ready for. And if you want more frameworks, more psychology, more of this, subscribe, because what we are building here is not an audience. It is an army of men who learn without permission, build without approval, and move in silence until the world has no choice but to pay attention.